a hard place. Like a wind from Goldland he sweeps by, blown far from his homeland in search of glory and honor. We walk in the garden of his turbulence.
Hello and welcome to Movie Joust. My name is Jesse Nussman, a film critic living here in Atlanta, Georgia. And with me on the other line, doom scrolling in their bedrooms, it's Josh Sewell and Jason Evans. Guys, welcome. We have an actual joust to have today. We've been a little polite on this show for a while.
Well, wait, the reality is most movies are good or they're bad. And we are really good at saying, hey, that good movie's that good and that bad movie's bad. And now we have one that I think is bad and you think is good.
Yes, we
Let's
now
do
have
it, baby.
an actual divisive movie. We're talking about Eddington, the new COVID set Western from writer-director Ari Aster, who, I mean, if you don't know who Ari Aster is, directed films such as Hereditary, Midsommar, My Beloved Beau is Afraid. And this has become, at least thus far, I think, the divisive kind of hot take dynamite movie to talk about this year. I don't really know what else will be coming around the corner. Maybe something from the fall festivals will spur more heated debate. But I think this movie is astounding and is great and is really insightful and smart and funny. Jason, you hated it. Josh, you read the Wikipedia page, which I think opens us up to be able to talk about spoilers with this movie.
Yeah.
So if you're not, I think Jason, would you say even if you haven't seen Eddington, I know there's things to spoil, but I think this spoiler conversation will help break down and illuminate some of the narrative pivots that we take here. We have to talk about, I think, all the narrative stuff in this movie in order to. I don't think this is going to be a fun conversation if we just sort of beat around some of the stuff that happens in it.
See, the thing I was going to say is it's very difficult for me to discuss why the movie fails without discussing what's in the movie, because I think the acting is good. I think it's shot beautifully. I mean, Ari Aster is a director in terms, technically at least, knows what he's doing. It's not like I'm going to come out here and say the movie looks like shit. The movie looks great. It's really beautiful at times. The overall plot, the idea behind it, I think is really interesting. This has a ton, and it's a great cast, has a ton going for it. It's the narrative that is the problem, that turned me off, that's turning off audiences. And I don't know how I can't dance around some of this stuff.
Yeah.
I have to actually say it. So,
and it's been out
spoiler
for
warning.
2 weeks. It's been out 2 weeks.
It's been out 2 weeks. It kind of worked out for us that we're not recording this right before the movie's coming out, and have left the dust settled a little bit. So Josh, I'm going to actually kind of hand the reins to you to feel free to kind of poke Jason and I and bring up whatever you want. Considering you sort of know the gist about where this story is going, I'll give a little preamble of, it's set in this small town in New Mexico during the pandemic in the summer of 2020, and rising tensions within this small community dealing with lockdowns and pedophile conspiracy theories and Black Lives Matter movement and protests, and really sort of comes to a head between these two men played by Joaquin Phoenix, who's the sheriff of the town, and Pedro Pascal, who is the mayor of the town. Other members of the cast also include Emma Stone and Austin Butler. So, Josh, the wheel of the car is yours. Feel free to
you
take
just said
us.
Austin Butler is functionally not in this movie. This is one of the problems with the film.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Okay.
So yeah, it says as a caveat, as the sort of ref here, I am of the camp that I see what Ari Aster's doing, I respect it, not for me. So the only movie of his that I've just actually liked is Midsummer, and it just sort of feels like one of those filmmakers who, and I don't know. This feels reductive, like it, because I know people like to peg Martin Scorsese this way too, but I feel like he knows like three notes on a piano and he bangs those notes really hard, and so if you're into that style of music, great. I'm gonna bow out. So let me sort of open the conversation like this. How would you respond to the sort of conversation that people are having around the movie that it doesn't really have anything to say other than both sides are bad, like, which seems to be th- some people view that the movie is treating that as some sort of mind-blowing revelation, right?
Jason, do you want to tackle this first?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is one of my major criticisms, which is that I think the film does a very, very interesting notion of sort of setting up some of the divide that happened among all of us, putting us back in that place of the pandemic, and even to a much lesser extent, but it's still very present in the movie, the Black Lives Matters protests that happened, that consumed the country over that summer in 2020. So I'm back there, but I don't feel like Astor had anything to say about it other than, hey, remember when this happened? I'm not saying that's a requirement. I'm not saying that he absolutely had to have some great revelation. I don't know that there is a great revelation to be had. Look, we're now living in a world where we don't have to wear masks every place. Maybe if I look back on that, I'm like, was that really a great idea? I don't know. I mean, we're living in a world where we're sensitive to certain racial things that maybe we weren't as sensitive to back then. Do I look back on those times and say we overreacted? Did we underreact? Am I even capable of making that judgment as someone with white skin? I mean, these are really complex things to talk about. I think the unfortunate thing is that Ari Aster's film, while taking us back to those times, doesn't have a lot to say about what was happening there other than it happened, and I'm going to put it in the middle of a story. My biggest problem with the film is that it's happening, and then suddenly for the final third of the film, it's like totally off the rails. None of that stuff matters anymore. There's just a nonstop shootout happening, and I don't even really know why or even who it's with. And it the final third took me so out of being back in that place that I was viscerally angry at the film for beginning to explore things, at least a little bit, and then suddenly going, no, hey, now everybody's got a gun. We're all snipers and we're shooting the whole town. I was like, really? That's your ultimate answer to this? What is even going on here,
So
Jesse?
I think this movie is very clearly about one thing, and it's less so COVID and it's less so Black Lives Matter protests. This is a movie about how the internet and social media has destroyed our brains. This is basically a movie that is filled with screens with characters looking at screens, looking at their phones. And I think Ari Aster views, I've heard him talk about in interviews since I saw the movie, and I'm thankful that we've kind of gotten these sort of 2 weeks to sort of chew on this movie. But I think he views what we all went through in 2020 as this sort of like the end of something, as like the old world. He said in interviews multiple times, like the old world dying and the new world beginning. And we had social media and technology before this, but the real enemy of this movie is, you know, people who have stuff going on in their personal lives, issues in their communities, things going on in the world that they are having trouble wrapping their heads around. And what do? Because we're all locked inside, they turn to their phone, they turn to television, they turn to social media. And the way that technology has kind of warped our minds into it's harder and harder for us to distinguish what's real and what's not. Our politics have become more performative. I think you see that both in sort of the quote unquote right wing characters as well as left wing characters in this movie. That's something we can dive more into if you guys have more questions. And what is sort of the doom final shot of the movie? It's a data center in this small New Mexico town, and there are all these sort of problems going on in this movie from, we hear multiple times about this tech company wants to come in, build this data center, and it's probably going to like pollute their environment. We hear about, or we see tensions between the local community and the Native American reservation that lives next door. And that becomes something that's not really spoken on because the characters are too busy fighting about these sort of culture wars online from masks and the Black Lives Matter movement, which I'm not saying that to say that those aren't things to have opinions or fight about, but we do see throughout the movie that there are multiple instances of, do these issues actually really have kind of like a day-to-day importance on this community? And that's maybe something that if you guys have questions, I can kind of elaborate on and get into, because I don't.
Hold on. I want to push back on your premise a little bit,
Okay.
because the main character in the film, the person that we spend the most time with, is Joaquin Phoenix's
Yes.
sheriff. And I don't feel like he's changed. I don't feel like he's addicted to his phone and social media and such. There are a lot of characters around him who you see them, head down the whole time.
Mhm.
I don't, if that was Aster's point, first of all, I'm not sure that he executed it all that well, because I didn't necessarily come away thinking, about the analysis that you just gave of the film. Maybe I'm too obtuse and I didn't catch it. But his main character, the person that we're with for the most part, doesn't feel to me like he's dramatically affected by the conspiracy. Again, characters around him are, but
Yeah.
he himself isn't necessarily affected by the doom scrolling and the such that you're talking about.
But you
If
see him
anything,
do that throughout multiple times in the movie. I mean, he's doom scrolling on his phone. The opening scene is him in like watching a YouTube video in a car of like, how do you convince. I really want to talk about the Emma Stone aspect of this movie, which I think has been kind of like misunderstood. Like, how do you ask your partner that you want to have a kid with them? Of like, he doesn't know how to have that conversations. He's someone who's constantly turning to the internet for answers, and you do see his mind a bit sort of like warped by the stuff he's seeing on social media. And yeah, I think
but
it's
his conflict
all.
with Pedro Pascal doesn't have any of that involved in it. And the ultimate resolution, what he ultimately ends up doing and what ends up happening to him, again, doesn't have hardly any connection at all to any of that.
So I would argue I don't think his. So what do you think that is at the center of his conflict with Pedro Pascal? Because I think what's at the center is sort of a
It's
feeling.
Emma Stone.
Yeah, it's a feeling.
What's at the center of his conflict is the fact that he's married to a woman who doesn't love him and has
Yeah.
trouble with intimacy, and he is bothered by the fact that she may have once been involved with Pedro Pascal.
Yeah, he's has this feeling of ineptitude. I mean, it really sort of became this sort of easy stand-in for, this is what I see as sort of like the core idea of the movie is like Joaquin Phoenix, this guy who I think Aster actually like handles this character with a bit of empathy, and there is this sort of weird dynamic with like the first half of the movie of like, yeah, you might disagree with this guy's politics, but like having an actor like Joaquin Phoenix who can provide a kind of tenderness to this character, like, is sort of forcing maybe you as a liberal audience member to be like, can you kind of empathize with this guy a little bit? He has a pretty shitty home life. But then, if you're a right-wing audience member, when that character shifts into becoming much more violent and much more unhinged in the second half of the movie of, yeah, you agree with this guy's politics, or you're going to now like agree as he's sort of turning into a homicidal, delusional maniac. But this is a person who is feeling inadequate in his day-to-day life and becomes obsessed with the sort of political posturing of, I don't think his character actually really cares about like the masks mandates or any of that stuff or the protest rallies in there, but sees it as a way for him to sort of upstage Pedro Pascal, who I would also argue doesn't really care about those things and is kind of more of this sort of just careerist politician. And that is sort of, I think, one of the things that I think is getting a bit sort of like Aster is a provocateur, and so I think he is sort of very intentionally sort of running headfirst into these sort of complicated issues and sort of forcing you as an audience member to, question how much do I really care about these sort of positions that I'm sort of standing up for, and does it really affect my life, or am I just sort of regurgitating stuff that's being fed to me through the internet and through social media? And am I really standing up for like personal freedom, or am I really just standing up for, my own sort of like, is putting a like black, square on your Instagram for like the Black Lives Matter stuff, which is a whole other thing I think we need to get into, or standing up against mask mandates and running for mayor like Joaquin Phoenix does. Is he doing that because he really believes in it, or is he doing it because it's going to sort of like boost his profile on social media and add for an extra sort of posturing and satisfaction in the community? Does that make sense?
Well,
kind of.
I hear you, and I want to let Josh get back in and ask us another question or direct this
Yes.
wherever he wants it to go. I would merely say that all the stuff you just said sounds like it would make for a very interesting, well-researched English paper. It did not make for a well-executed, entertaining film. I would like to point out to you that the cinema score for this movie, which
Oh,
is
we can't get into cinema score.
Wait, hold
That's
on a
about
second.
marketing.
It's not about marketing. It is about whether or not the people who came to see your film enjoyed it. The cinema score for this film is a C minus.
Right.
Like,
They ask people as they come out of this movie, which is like meant to be, as I mentioned, like Aster is a provocateur. He is trying to sort of unsettle you as an audience member. And then you ask people like, coming out of the theater, like, what did you think of that? And if they're like, I had a bad time, but like, I don't know. I'm someone who thinks like cinema score is just total like marketing bullshit that like doesn't mean anything.
and I would disagree with you. I think that it matters whether or not people enjoy your film and whether they come out of it and say, I want someone else to go see that so I can talk to them about it. And the bottom line is people came out of this movie and said, I did not enjoy it. I don't want to talk about it. I don't think my friends should go see it. It is getting, really poor scores from people who should be fans of this. Believe me, there's not like, you know, it's not like a family that's going out to see, the new Disney film is like, oh, it's sold out. Let's go see Eddington instead. I mean, this is already people who are predisposed to like this movie, and they're telling you we didn't like it.
Is
Josh.
this? I'm wondering though, like, are they? And again, Cinema Score has its fans and detractors, but are they interviewing, like we said, just the dudes who saw, or the people who saw Joaquin Phoenix and Pedro Pascal on the poster? Or are they interviewing people who know what they're in
Wait,
for with an Ari
Hold on.
Aster film?
How unsophisticated do you think the audience is? You really think that there are people who saw, first of all, like Joaquin Phoenix is
people
not
went
like,
and
people
saw
don't-
Uncut Gems and thought it was going to be like an Adam Sandler comedy. I think we
Now
cannot
that's-
underestimate
okay, now-
how stupid people can be.
right,
As
but
someone-
that is very different than an Ari Aster film starring Joaquin Phoenix. Doesn't have an Adam Sandler reputation, and Pedro Pascal, frankly, doesn't either. This film, to me, very much fits in the kind of films that Joaquin Phoenix makes.
I will say that as somebody who has stood behind people in the ticket line that just say 2 for Will Smith, please. It's
But Joaquin Phoenix is not. Joaquin
all right.
Phoenix,
Let's argue about the film. Josh, ask us about the film. We can't get into this like does cinema score matter stuff. That's going to be like a 4-hour episode.
I will keep I'll keep it sort of revolving around something we're sort of talking about here, which is when you're talking about a character who you're supposed to empathize with for the first half of the movie before he makes some dramatically terrible decisions halfway through. Do we not feel like Joaquin Phoenix is sort of already typecast in that vein as of late anyway?
I think that's fair.
Supposed to be shocked when Joker goes Joker in the last half of the film, like
yeah, I think that's fair, and maybe some of that is what is your relationship to Joaquin Phoenix, which is a whole other interesting conversation to have. And it now seems to be like, I wonder if post Joker and that movie being such a phenomenon, regardless of what you think about it, has that changed a certain perception of him as an actor, of just sort of like, he plays effed up crazy people, which, hasn't always been like my view of him. And like, weirdly, like, I'm someone who's like, that Joker performance isn't even like, that's not what he's like capable of, like, as a great actor. The idea of him as this like Daniel Day-Lewis transformation actor. But I think this is a movie that is both Aster, one thing I did want to bring up, Aster is from New Mexico. I also like lived in New Mexico for a period of time, so maybe can, help sort of provide some context for some of this stuff. And I think this is a very like well observed movie where he has empathy for all of these people and all of these characters. Yet Aster, I think, also in this, I don't know whether it's like a specifically like millennial way, is a bit of just sort of like, we're fucked. Like we're all like, this is going up in flames. And maybe I'm kind of person like, I think Aster's style is he has this very aggressive, assaultive, absurdist viewpoint on the world of just sort of like, I'm going to literalize the deepest, most disturbing parts of our psyche. And I think that was a bit more easy to swallow for kind of your mainstream audience when he was working in a horror genre. And now that he's moved to like this and Beau is Afraid, which have been more divisive, I think for me, it's been sort of illuminating of like, oh, I fully get like who this guy is now. This guy is not like, a mainstream horror auteur. He's not like James Wan. This guy, he's not even like a Robert Eggers. Like, this guy is someone who views the world in this like nightmarish, nihilistic way and is just sort of like, it's all scary, and kind of my only reaction is just to laugh at it. And I want to say, for as much as Jason talking about this movie being kind of like really sort of like depressing and like horrible to sit through,
I found some really funny moments.
This is, I think, like the funniest movie I've seen all year. Like, I found this movie hysterically funny, and there was a certain aspect to sitting in this theater with an audience and kind of laughing at like, yeah, this is not just how it was, but this is kind of still how the world is, and we've all gone crazy. And that, to me, like, the movie that this made me think of the most is something like Network. And in the way that Network is a movie about how television as a medium is being corrupted and destroying how we interact with each other, destroying our politics. And that is sort of a movie of what this is about, but for the internet. And I don't know. I was sitting there laughing at how increasingly absurd this movie gets, and sort of feeling like, yeah, I don't know what the answer is. We're probably all just spiraling towards a spot that's like not good, and this is a movie that's like that. What else can we do but sort of laugh at how like ridiculous American society has gotten?
I mean, okay, yeah, I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you that, first of all, like I said, it is very funny. The first half has a number of really. By the way, it's funny in a, not in a joke kind of way. It's funny in a, I'm observing people who don't realize they're being ridiculous kind of way.
Yes.
I mean, especially like some of the young, the young liberals.
Oh my God. Can we please talk about that?
Go ahead. It's just,
I mean, that's another one of those, I think, is such a perfect joke that I think people are kind of misinterpreting, of like, I've kind of been rolling my eyes at, I don't necessarily think you feel this way, Jason, but like, I'm seeing reactions of people online being like, well, how dare he criticize, the sort of the good nature of Black Lives Matter protesters. And again, I don't think Aster is criticizing
them, but it is sort of funny.
He's criticizing a kind of like empty liberal lip service And maybe like this isn't a me opinion, but I thought it was pretty funny that in one point during the screening at one there's one character in this movie that is like a young man who, to give people the best, this was really the scene that like illuminated this section of the movie to me. Like a young teenage boy, the high school kids are hanging out. He sees a girl he likes. She is like the liberal activist at her school, and he like Googles like who is Maya Angelou because he sees her like read with a Maya Angelou book on her like under her
He's
shoulder.
like, hey, I dig that. Yeah.
Yes, and that bit then feeding into this kid doing this kind of like performative activism of like he doesn't believe the stuff he's saying. He probably doesn't even know half the things he's talking about, but he's doing it because there is a sort of, it's a way to advance the social hierarchy in his sort of group of teenagers at his town. And then what happens to that kid at the end of the movie? He immediately swings to the right and becomes a like Kyle Rittenhouse figure. And
Yeah.
really the butt of the joke with that character is like this thing of like politics is so embedded into the just sort of way we talk about on the internet, and you can't get away with it, and the way in which kids who are now growing up with social media, like that is a form of social currency. And like you can see this in the real world with like, you know, I see these videos of like these like young Gen Z MAGA guys at like rallies and stuff like that, and they don't have any beliefs. People like question them about like, so what do you like about like Trump or whatnot? And like I'm not saying like, you know, not to get us into a right or wrong thing with that, but they're doing it because it's a lifestyle brand. And I thought that was such a brilliant joke that of just sort of like, yeah, young people today who seem like they're really passionate, whether they're on the right side of the political argument or the left side, but really they're just doing it because it's social currency. And there was this hilarious moment where the kid is like getting up at like a Black Lives Matter protest. Should we mention pretty much all the Black Lives Matter protesters in this town are all white.
All white.
There's
All white.
there's one black guy in this town who works for the sheriff's department under Joaquin Phoenix, and he feels really conflicted about this. I think that's a really interesting character that maybe if you guys have questions about, we can kind of dive into. But there's a moment where this teenage kid goes up and he's like, I feel like we need to, you know, white people need to take a seat back and we need to dismantle white patriarchy and stuff. But he's like, before we do that, I have something I need to say. And my girlfriend, who is not white, like leaned over to me and was like, that is the most white people shit I've ever seen. Of like the joke being, you know, it is kind of that joke at the center of Get Out as well. Of, you know, a kind of performative liberalism and a lack of self-awareness and tone deafness that I found really funny in the movie. And I've seen some people kind of point out, you know, maybe feeling that that's like a little artificially constructed in the way that like,
but Jesse, the bottom line to me about the film is that Aster has interesting ideas. The things you're talking about are interesting things.
I think
to
they're
talk
really
about, and
nuanced, exciting things of like it. This is me just sort of counteracting the idea that like he has nothing to say. Like I think he has really pointed, nuanced things to say about our current sort of political tribalism and how the internet is sort of fueling that in a way.
the film has interesting ideas. It's just the ultimate execution of them and the way they are brought together, and the you know the I just can't get away from the final 30 minutes being nothing but a shootout.
Okay. That we definitely need to talk about, because I think that's also another kind of misunderstood part of the movie. But continue with your point.
Were the final 30 minutes not nothing but a shootout?
Well, it is a shootout, but like it's shootout that is, you know, I kind of want to go back and see the movie because I've seen some theories as to like, is the shootout, which is basically Joaquin Phoenix fighting with like armed Antifa people, or what he thinks is armed Antifa
total fantasy.
fighters.
Like
Right.
ridiculous, silly fantasy.
Right.
In a film that otherwise is trying to adhere to reality.
Yeah, and maybe to me, like Aster's style is so heightened and absurd anyway that I was willing to go with him when the movie sort of jumps into a fantastical reality that is like, here's the joke. There's no like Antifa like crisis actors going in that are who are like heavily militarized and being like, look how absurd and stupid that whole idea is. As well as I have seen some other people point out, and I want to go back and see the movie again to see if this is accurate, that the little like emblem that's on the plane when those soldiers are first introduced appears later when you see the data center, and of saying that like that those soldiers representing, they are being paid by the actual conspiracy has nothing to do with like right or left politics. The actual conspiracy has to do with these tech people dividing America and leaning into our political anxieties, whether they're real or not, and using that in order to just sort of advance their profits, because all of our arguing online is really doing nothing but sort of fueling their data and fueling the information they collect from us. Again, I want to see the movie again to be able to like iron out whether or not that's what it's happening. But even then, like even if it's all in Joaquin Phoenix's head and those are meant to be like armed Antifa soldiers, I was with that because I was like, this is part of the like absurd comedy of this, of like, this guy is so paranoid and is so delusional that like, yeah, of course he thinks that like armed Antifa people are coming to kill him in this small New Mexico town that's like 1,000 people.
You've just described to me that the movie requires me to do homework after I've seen it.
Isn't that fun though? We talk all the time of like, you know, the reception to this movie has been a little funny to me in the light of something like Civil War last year that came out, was a hit, but people were kind of like, well, I didn't like how sort of like that movie just sort of felt like it was like pussyfooting around like American politics and wasn't really to sort of like charge into that. And then
this movie pussyfoots around American politics also because it doesn't take a stand. It doesn't take a stand on anything.
But so you want it to take more of like a right versus left stance, and like I feel like the politics of this movie are pretty clear in a way.
Look, I'm close to tapped out on this topic anyway. But again, one of my central problems with the film is that I feel like the film in the first half and the film in the back half are so diametrically opposed. They're so different from each other. Look, Joaquin Phoenix's character is a bungling. He can barely record a video on his computer. Cuckolded, ineffective guy in the first half of the movie, and in the back half of the movie, he's suddenly an incredibly cool and efficient James Bond-like killer who can navigate any scenario. Everything about the back half and the front half don't mesh together. But again, my other problem with it is takes us to the era, takes us to this very fraught time, and doesn't have a lot to say other than this was a very fraught time. I'm not saying it has to say the right was right or the left was wrong or the left was right and the right was wrong, but have something more to say than, hey, remember when we all wore masks and we went out in the streets and said, this is awful? It doesn't have anything, to me, it didn't have anything to say beyond that. Although I am now that we're discussing it, I'm seeing some of the threads that you're talking about regarding social media, doom scrolling and things like that. And that's interesting. I wish Aster had been a little more overt about that, so I would have gotten it when I actually watched the damn movie.
Yeah, I think all of it is intentionally obscured of like the real issues or what's happening in the background in this movie. And even I think Aster is reflecting that in sort of the visual language of how this movie is shot, of like there's a lot of scenes where like two characters are having a conversation in the foreground, and then sometimes in the case of the shootout it's something like violent and scary, and then sometimes like the scene in the supermarket where the woman is like taking stuff out of like someone's cart and Joaquin Phoenix is like, hey, can you please stop doing that? Like, it's a funny moment, but like he's constantly giving you clues, I think, to like what the problems are in the foreground are not actually what this community should be talking about. And there's all this stuff in the background with the data center, with the Emma Stone character, who I feel like it's pretty heavily leaned on, was like sexually abused by her father, and it like actually needs like real help. And like I think that Emma Stone performance is maybe like it's maybe the best performance in the movie, of just sort of like what she is required to do is so hard for like as little. She has to be a character that is kind of constantly glanced over, but has to like communicate to you through her body language of like, now there's something like actually up with this woman, and she's actually going through something. And
But we don't spend enough time with her to really get to know.
but that's because we're
Any of that.
with
We
the Joaquin
experience her,
Phoenix
we experience
character.
her through Joaquin Phoenix's eyes.
Right, which I think is sort of the point of the movie, is like no one else is sort of acknowledging her, and is like only
Certainly
interested
not her
in
mother.
her. Yeah, not her mother, not Joaquin Phoenix. And if he wants to get close to her, maybe he needs to engage with that instead of, airing her dirty laundry on social media and, trying to run for mayor. And, I like, you talked about frustration with the Austin Butler character. I think that's also like a brilliant piece of casting, of just like, you got to find someone who has that right amount of like sexuality, but smarm, to like be
He's
that
a
kind of
cult leader.
yeah.
He's a cult leader, and
He's
he's
a
in the scene, he's in the
QAnon
movie
cult
for.
leader. Yeah,
He's in the movie for like 2 scenes. It does, and
but
he
he's
doesn't.
great in those 2 scenes.
I, he's really only in one of them. The other
Yeah.
one, he just kind of shows up, puts her in a car, and drives away. I mean, it's a waste of a really quality. I don't know. I don't think we need to go on with this much longer. I get why you liked it. I
Yeah.
understand. It's not a film that's just being universally trashed or anything like that.
No, it's people seem to have like very heated reactions about it. I'm planning this is like one of the best movies of the year in my view. I think Aster is now going into a zone of someone like, I've been thinking about people like Paul Verhoeven or Brian De Palma or David Lynch or David Cronenberg, people who are like, I don't give an F what you as an audience think, and I'm gonna like really like put you through the ringer. And that oftentimes creates like very polarized, intense reactions of people at the time, and then as the dust settles, being like, I don't know, though, using those guys as examples have all had movies that people were really like pissed people off at the time, and then decades later people come around to as being like, no, there was actually like a lot there, or that was sort of a necessary assaultive experience to have. And I kind of like that Aster is in that zone. I don't know where his career will take him, but to me he's just like one of the more exciting artists around. So
I want to be very clear that this film is not Mulholland Drive.
it's not, though. The Lynch movies I was thinking of were like Fire Walk with Me and Lost Highway, which brilliantly at the time used Siskel and Ebert's Two Thumbs Down as a promotional tool for the movie. No one's got anything else to say. No.
I think
Go see Eddington. It's great. Oh God.
It's not.
It's great.
You'll probably be
I was
disappointed.
gonna say
A masterwork.
I guess we're gonna say Jesse won the joust just by beating everybody else into submission, maybe.
In pure Ari Aster style, I just beat you all into submission. You guys aren't Beau is Afraid guys either, right?
No.
Yeah. That's one I didn't know what to think about at the time, and now years later I'm like, that movie's got like 5 or 6 scenes in it that might be like some of the funniest shit I've ever seen. And like,
a 3-hour-long movie. Awesome.
I know.
5 or 6
Yeah.
quality scenes in a 3-hour movie.
What a guy. Well, that about wraps this up. If you want to hear an episode where we're not arguing, check out Josh and Jason talk about Fantastic Four. And stay tuned in the coming weeks as we talk about more summer movies, from Weapons to Freakier Friday to The Return of Naked Gun, and the return of someone who I do think is kind of a fake provocateur, Darren Aronofsky. So shots fired right there.